Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Peter Llewellyn. I run the services at MedComms So you'll find information, resources, services, activities, and so on, suitable for people who work in and around medical communications, medical education, medical publishing, and so on, across the globe. Basically, there's a global community of you out there. You'll find lots of information, also particularly for those of you who want to learn more about the business. Maybe you want to become a medical writer or account manager or whatever. So first, medcommsjob.com is worth having a look at. And everyone will find loads of video content now over at NetworkPharma TV, where we've got more than 500 videos on all sorts of topics to do with MedComms. These webinars are great because we're running a lot of them. We can bring in people from all over talking about all manner of topics, and we've got another good sized audience with us again today. So looking forward to a lively discussion. Today I'm absolutely delighted. We've got the guys from Zenopa, we've got Mark and Seb, talking to us about a survey they just completed. Literally, I guess it finished a couple of weeks ago, didn't it, guys? So it's hot off the press. And we're going to hear the top line results of the Healthcare Communications Talent Insight Survey 2023. So Mark, I'm going to hand over to you, I think, and we'll have a presentation and then the Q&A.
Thank you very much, Peter. That's appreciated. I'm Mark Denton. I'm the Managing Director. I'll just let Seb introduce himself.
Hi everyone, so I'm Seb. I'm a senior healthcare communications and consultancy consultant and recruiter, and I've been supporting both Peter and Mark in the production of this survey.
Thank you very much, Seb. We'll crack on. Okay, thank you very much, guys. So we'll try and have about 20 minutes of this presentation and then go into the Q&A. This presentation is a cut from the main deck. At the end of this, the main deck will be circulated. So there were 1,270 people completed this survey. About 800 provide their email, and it'll automatically be emailed out to those 800. For those of you who weren't in that group, there'll be a link on the end and you'll be able to download it from the Zenopa website. So we've said who we are, so we won't repeat that. It's interesting, this is the first major survey for the last couple of years. We're looking at the trends in MedComms networking, and as I said, 1,270 responses. It was huge. Thank you very much to everybody who took their time to fill in what was a long survey. So what are we covering? Industry hiring plans, context demographics, salary pay, working hours, overtime, pensions, time off, paid leave, benefits, flexible working and working from home, satisfaction, and also international. So the great news to start off with, we've had COVID, we had a mini boom post-COVID, but this is the information from over 200 hiring managers in UK healthcare communications. Over half of them are anticipating an increase in headcount in the next 12 months. About a quarter the same, and only 10% a decrease. And, healthcare communications, there are agencies on the rise and agencies on the fall. So that 10% would be a normal expectation as some grow and some decline. So the outlook for the industry and the year ahead is really positive. Demographics, inclusivity is very important, and we look at this. The UK figure is 82%, white, 18% others. Within this sample 1,077 people. That's how big it was. 84.4% and 15-16% the other way. So there's still a bit of work to do there, but we're pretty reflective of the whole UK demographic. Work location, I don't think this will come as a great surprise to many people. It's been like this for decades. London and the Southeast, about half of the people are in London and the Southeast. The Northwest is the other major hub, about a quarter. And then the other 20-25% are sprinkled across the rest of the UK. So This is really quite an exciting one. Again, 1,077 people responded to this. We're looking at inclusion and disability inclusion. I was recently at a face-to-face meeting in Buckinghamshire where we're talking about disability. The national average is about 17.7% people disabled. Half of those virtually are not employed. The really exciting thing is our industry, we do employ those people on the same rate as the national average. We are well ahead of every other sector virtually in terms of employing disability people. And disability isn't just physical disability. You can see down from the list here, mental health conditions are the biggest area. But, the industry can really feel good about its employability and inclusivity of this disabled bodies. Always a hot topic, salaries and gender. So what we've done on this is split it between the under 35s and over 35s. Are things getting better in terms of that equality? Is there something at the end of careers that alter it? Is it historic? Sure, those questions will come out in the debate later on and the viewpoints of it. But the hard facts are under 35s, women get paid more than men at the moment. And this was a sample of 257 women, 62 men. Right? Over 35, men are getting paid more than women. And that was a sample of 246 women and 71 men. So there's a lot of data in there. I think there'll be one really in the Q&A that people are keen to get under the skin of. This is one of my favorite graphs. If you're in the scientific area, what we've done here is accumulated all the job roles so that actually you can see as an industry where your career can go as a scientific person. So, at the left-hand side here, we have, the associate medical writers, followed by the medical writers, followed by senior medical writers, followed by principal medical writers, and then we're into scientific team leaders and scientific directors. You can get a whole career view of what our industry has to offer just from this slide. We'll go into some of the more detail, but it's a great snapshot in one picture. Taking just one of those, the full deck has every one of these. For this 20-minute presentation, we've taken one out. We looked at senior medical writers because it's the biggest sample group. This is 95 as a sample. And what we've done is something that I haven't seen before, is that because there is so much variation hours worked, if you just look at the basic pay, it gives a very broad spectrum, but doesn't actually reflect where people are. So what we've done in this survey is we've looked at the 40-hour equivalent salary. And if you're on 30 hours, we've made it 40 hours so that we can look at that comparatively person to person. And on the left-hand side, we get that comparator for that 40-hour equivalent. And then you see the scales now up, and you can see exactly what the scale of salary would be for everybody on a 40-hour equivalent within senior medical writer. And as I say in the full deck, there's this for every role. There's the average there. Look at that. It's actually gone up to 51,000. I think that's about 20 to 25% more than it was 2 years ago. It's significant. Again, in terms of, I like the distribution. This is the client services. Didn't have quite so much data in this sample, 147, which is still significant. And again, you can see, where the careers begin as account exec, going through to account manager, senior account manager. So there's a lot to do with titles here. That's one for the debate. The span is huge, and it is with account director as well in terms of salary. So when people go an average salary, it's important to look at the range of salaries and where that person is in that development rather than a single lone figure. And then, of course, we move into associate director and then client services director. I quite like this one. It's quite funny. No one likes to pay anyone 95 to 100,000 by the looks of it. No, if we're going to go on 95, let's flip it over to the top, eh? And then again, one slide out of the whole deck, right? We just looked at the account director, sample size of 40. And again, we did the same thing, you know, in terms of taking the 40-hour equivalent. You can see that actually on a 40-hour equivalent, it's, you know, 63,000 as an AD. But you can see how the spread changes once you make that 40-hour equivalent. And so all the way through our presentations, we've tried to normalize things on a 40-hour equivalent so it's comparative for everybody and they can see, hang on, how good or bad is this for me? Of course, gender pay right up there again. So what we've done here, again, senior medical writers, sample size of 93, decent set. Let's have a look at actually across this role, what's the difference? You can see, you know, we've got a few oddball things at this end. We're not sure whether they're really senior medical writers or not, but that was the true data. So what we did is we excluded those and included. So if we include those, then the males are higher. But if we exclude these oddball things for senior medical writer, actually, female medical writers get paid £500 more on average than male. Right? You could argue it's not significant because we only got 21 guys and 72 females. We can come into that afterwards. But again, you can see that means actually effectively in that kind of role, there isn't a gender pay gap. This is really, I like this one a lot. So we asked you the question of what was your contracted hours and what hours did you want to do? So across all people, you know, we had, you know, 40% are working their hours they'd like to. There's a few that want to work more hours than they're doing. And then there's quite a few that would like to work less hours. You know, it's hard from this to work out, okay, is that because they haven't got the option with their employer to work less hours, or is it simply because they've got bills to pay and actually we've all got to pay them, so we have to work the hours required to keep our lifestyle where we'd like it to be? The really interesting thing on this is when we look at the people who are doing 31 hours or less, that's 4 days a week or less, then we're up at 80% of them are happy with their hours. And then there's a smattering that want more. You know, maybe some of these are on a 20-hour contract and wants a 25. But you can see people working less hours are more happy within the role and hours they've got. This is a myth buster. This is another one. So we've cut the data and go, you know, there are all those people saying people who work 4 days a week or 3 days a week, they don't do as much overtime as us full-timers. They don't contribute as much as the rest of us do in terms of extras. It's a myth, right? Here we've cut the data into everybody, and those people are under 31 hours. That's 804 people as a total sample and 114 people at that 31 hours. This is a big data set for this kind of thing. If we look at the individual 0, 1 to 5, there's a bit of up and down. So on the right hand side, I put it on the cumulative graph, right? When you look at the cumulative graph, you can see realistically, those people on under 31 hours are doing proportionally as much overtime as everyone else, right? So thanks for you guys. That's a complete myth buster on what people have been saying. I'm sure we'll have something in the Q&A. Pension contributions. Yeah, these are simply facts. We were looking for some information across the country in terms of benchmarking it. We haven't found any yet. It looks pretty good, you know, 47% is the peak. We'd like to get a bit more granular when we look at that again next year and see, you know, whether we're improving or not on that. But it looks pretty positive. Holidays, this is always a difficult one when we analyze it because, you know, is a Christmas gift an extra 3 days holidays or not? We ask people to put that into their total days. So we've got a measure of it. So is it a benefit or is it a total holiday entitlement? So you can see most people are in the 25 to 30 days. I think again, next year, you know, we want to get a bit granular around that 30 and find out. In addition to those days, then we've got, you know, something like 18% get plus a birthday in there. And then it's just over 50% is a dictate you have to take the days off over Christmas. So that's where we are. It's kind of interesting in terms of plus birthday. That's a regular one that comes up. And I think if we look at the granular detail later on, we'll see that actually the more people have 30 days, then the plus birthday is less often included. This is a really hot topic in terms of maternity and paternity pay. So this isn't the government taxpayers' maternity and paternity pay. This is the extra given by businesses to individuals. So on top of standard. So you see here on the women's maternity pay, it's looking quite good. There's kind of 60% are getting extra 12 weeks pay. Paternity, it kind of drops at 2 to 3 weeks. We're down to 25%. So again, this is one for the debate. Companies give a lot more money on maternity than they give on paternity. It's very clear differential. This was a great one. Thanks for you all filling this one in. Which perks and benefits do you perceive as valuable and which do you get? So the way we did this data is we actually, for your first, second, and third, most valuable, and normalized it. And then we looked at actually what people receive. And there's quite a good correlation between the two. Private healthcare is right up there as the number one given, but it's well ahead. This is the one people want. Right? Maybe the anomaly in here is personal performance bonuses. More companies give company performance bonuses, more people are keener on personal performance bonuses. And that's always one of those questions in a business. Do we do it for everyone? How are we going to do this? There's something down here with cycled work schemes that it's offered by a lot of people, but it's not that highly valued by everybody. So that might just be simply a small minority group like to ride their bicycles while the rest of us are taking trains and cars. Flexible working. Yeah, we can see this in terms of, over 50% get 1 hour plus or minus on the end of the day. I thought that might have been a bit higher. This one I was quite shocked at. Ad hoc working when it's requested, that was just over 50%. I'd have thought for most companies, any reasonable request that actually I need a couple of hours off here or there would have been in. So that's much lower than actually I'd have expected. Making up those flex hours the next day or whatever, I'd have thought that would have been higher as well. Choosing your own hours, yeah, that's not surprised me, down at under 10%. This is one that a lot of people talk about. Undertake full-time hours in 4 days. We're down at 8%. It's not that high in terms of the offering, and there's quite a few. 9% don't get anything in terms of flexibility. So again, one to talk about afterwards. This surprised me even after COVID. When I looked at this slide, we have over 40%. This sample size is 680 people. Over 40% are working 5 days remotely. That's huge, right? 0 days, we're down at 5%, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Most people would appear to be working at home most of the time. And this is a survey that was been carried out during this last month. Right? So actually, the thing that people talk about back to work really isn't happening in our industry on a major scale. It's interesting that actually the people who want to work at home is less than those that do. Right? So that could be people working remotely, literally out of distance to commute to the office, and they'd like to go 1 day a week or something. There's a gap there in terms of people actually do like some time in the office and they're not getting it. Which leads us into satisfaction. These look like small differences, but on a scale that they're quite important. And I think there's some really interesting ones in here. I really like the stat here on white and non-white. Potentially, this is one for our discussion. There's a differential in here, and if that differential wasn't there, maybe that would be a sign that we had got to total inclusivity of everybody. So that could be an inclusivity metric down the line. And the same again, it's on a smaller level between non-disability and disability. You know, that's an inclusivity metric potentially in there. Of course, we've got managers who are possibly at Wimbledon are happier than anybody else. But again, that might be related to well-being. And if you have more control, then that's a happier metric. And it's no surprise, I'm sure everybody knows that client services are never quite as happy as writers. So that's kind of, we could go into that. The other one here is the under 35s and the over 35s. And again, you know, that's a discussion point. It could be simply that people who have committed to the industry for a long time are happier in the industry. So moving on to international remote hires, this is a very high debate. So we've got, you know, don't know 9%, we've got 50-50 of people would hire someone or have someone employed remotely outside of the UK for the UK business. I'm expecting quite a lot to come back on that because Seb will have a view on this. So this may be that they've got an existing member of staff who has moved abroad and works remotely, or whether they would actually have someone from Australia link in and say, can you give me a job from here, please? So that's one for the debate. So as I said, all of those who spent, you know, 15 minutes filling this questionnaire, it was a lengthy questionnaire, something like 2/3, about 800 put on their email address, will be emailing the full report with all the detail of every role and average salaries out. So that'll happen automatically. For those of you who didn't do the report and they'd like it, then, you know, go onto our website on that link and you'll be able to download it from there. So thank you very much. It's over to the Q&A.
Brilliant, thanks, guys. Can we just lose the slides then, Mark? So yeah, I'm going to start. Let's a bit of context here, okay? Firstly, I think the reason I get involved and support this sort of an exercise is because I think as an industry, we're not good enough at sharing information and about the business and so on. And I've been banging on about this for a long time. So I've supported a number of exercises in the past, which is just about sharing some information. You can argue about quite how accurate it is, let's be honest about it. But if it doesn't give you some food for thought, then you know, you're not thinking about it. I think there's loads of food for thought in there. And that was a lot of data we collected there. So my position is very straightforward. I'd rather get that data out there. I want people to talk about it. I know individual agencies, companies, whatever, have their own internal data, but to share the data starts to give us some benchmarking. So having said which, it's an online survey and it needs a big fat health warning across the top of it. And I think we should all be sensible and accept that. So lots of data done online, giving us lots of food for thought. Yeah, and I think that's really, really important in and around MedComms. So thank you, Zenopa, for doing that. Again, to the audience, very keen to get your questions and comments. We've got a number coming in. Any observations, argue with it, whatever. Put your point of view in, we'll try and weave that into the discussion, okay? We should make a very clear point. You've made it, frankly, but I'm going to make it again. There's a lot more data that you've got, isn't there? So all we've seen at the moment is the top line and some summary data. We've got a number of questions coming in. Have you got this data for that or that group or whatever? So please, everybody, the full report's available, and I'd encourage you to follow up with the guys from Zenopa, okay? Bearing in mind that in some cases, if you slice and dice this data too much, you end up with, I don't know, 5 people in one category. You need to be careful what you're saying about them, okay? But it should be giving us some food for thought. Right, okay, that's enough of a health warning from me, but I think it's important. Seb, I'm going to bring you straight in because I'm just intrigued. As someone that's active in this marketplace, you're placing people, you're dealing across a lot of the UK agencies. Just give me straight up, what if anything in there took you by surprise? What would you like to sort of raise as points in there?
A few things actually. So first of all, as you said, you know, we're not necessarily known for being that open about things that are happening in the industry. But on MedComms Day, a lot of people were posting about it has been a rather quiet over the sort of beginning of the year in regards to sort of hiring, the work coming through to medical communications agencies. So it was great to hear from hiring managers that there is growth and there are plans to grow teams. I think that was really exciting. I mean, overall, if you include the retention of growth and increasing growth, it was around sort of 80%, which is fantastic, and shows that things are improving. I think the other thing...
I'm going to cut. Sorry, Seb, I'm going to do this a little bit because otherwise we'll cover lots of ground too quickly. I just want to pin you down on that one point because it is a very lively discussion, or has been this year, that things are a little bit quieter this year versus the last couple of years, and it's been a little bit unclear as to whether it really is that much quieter or whether it's been so crazy for the last couple of years that it just feels a little bit quieter, sort of thing. But from your point of view, I know what the survey's saying, but from your point of view, would you just go, well, that's what we're saying? It has been a bit quiet, but there's a lot of positivity going forward. Is the survey backing up what you're seeing on the ground?
It is now. So
it's picking up. Okay.
Yeah, we are seeing things picking up, and you know, I am obviously speaking from our own experiences and what we've discussed with both candidates and clients. Things at the start of the year were quieter, and we have seen other recruitment agencies specialising in MedComms saying the same, and also agencies who share with us, you know, things that have affected the workflow coming in and therefore their hiring plans. But we're now seeing things picking up. It's been a lot busier. I'm working with a lot of medical writers and account handlers currently, so things are looking a lot more positive, definitely.
Okay. And again, this is just worth making the point. We're talking in June 2023. You know, this survey was just done or just completed a couple of weeks ago, sort of thing. So we are looking at very immediate data here, which is just again a point worth making here. We're not looking at something from a year ago. This is quite recent data.
Yeah, this is
yes.
Yeah, this is between May and June. Yeah, so it's very recent. Yeah,
exactly. So things are on the up. So sorry, I did interrupt you there. You were off on one there. Keep going.
Sorry,
on the things
I mean, obviously the other things that stood out to me that surprised me were these senior medical writers that are claiming they're earning £90,000 sort of scientific director salaries. So obviously there must be some issues there because, you know, in the past people have mentioned that there's been concern over overinflated salaries. So I'm hoping there aren't any agencies that are paying that level, and that is a mistake because it's not helping the industry and the candidates themselves. But I guess the other thing that really stood out for me was the hiring, allowing people to work remotely in another country. That came as a surprise, mainly because when it comes to recruiting, that option isn't necessarily available when I'm speaking to a lot of clients. Now, I think what that isn't because they wouldn't want to take people on abroad. It's down to whether they've got offices abroad for tax purposes, whether they've got a relationship with a company like Deal that obviously are able to act as a third-party payroll for companies. So if you haven't got that and you want to look into that, their service is free to companies that are below 200 employees. But it would obviously open things up if we could attract talent from elsewhere. But ultimately, that was really interesting to see. I do agree with what Mark's was sort of suggesting in that it probably is going to be more of a case that is offered to people who are established in the company already, rather than people, you know, who are being actively hired at that moment in time. But that was probably the most standout things for me.
Okay, I admit, and just taking that one first, I commented on that when I saw the results. I was surprised how many people were saying yes to that. And again, the data's the data, and you've got to work with it, sort of thing. But it's a complex scenario out there, isn't it? You know, there are these you call them third-party payroll people like Deal and so on. That's all just starting to kick off, isn't it, in the last year or so? But it's not. You know, it does cost, and I'm sure a lot of agencies will sit and go, well, actually the practicalities are not that easy, because you know, there's quite a lot of press about the fact that we can now work at anywhere in the world and we can do anything. It's not quite like that in practice, and I think we just have to, again, it's interesting that maybe the MedComms agencies have gone as far as they seem to have done from that data. But again, we shouldn't probably give everyone the idea that everyone's recruiting from everywhere in the world, should we? Because there are some practical difficulties, legal, tax, and so on. Yeah.
And to be honest, just to add to that, the agencies that I work with, when I'm speaking to them, all of them are trying to actively figure out ways of making that work. So it's not, people aren't just doing saying no for the sake of saying no. They are genuinely wanting to try and get more talent from all around the world in, because it's a candidate short market, or at least it was. It's now not so much. But yeah.
And so on that note, I mean, it's quite interesting. Some of that data is quite interesting in terms of remote working and so on. And again, a point that you, Mark, made, I think you've touched on it, you know, so many people are working from home all the time. Actually, there's a strong suggestion that not everyone wants to work all the time. So maybe the 4 days in your, 1 day in the office, 4 days at home type working is going to suit a lot of people and so on. But again, a lot of variation there. Somebody asked a question which was basically along the lines of, I've just lost it now, it was basically surprising seeing how many people are working at home that fully remote contracts are not more available. So I think, is it fair to say, I don't know, I'm not sure on my grounds here. So what, but you guys do. So is it fair to say that a lot of the agencies still seem to take people on office-based contracts and then say, if you want to work at home some of the time you can, as opposed to a contract that says you shall work at home and come into the office on occasions? Does that make sense? Is that what's happening or not? Mark, have you got a view on that? Am I just wrong, or am I somewhere somewhere near truth there?
I think we'd have to get some of the people from the employers in terms of their contracts in there. You know, we don't, and you know, Seb can back it, so we don't hear what's in the contract too much in terms of the black and white. We hear about actually the, you know, it's 100% remote or whatever is available, but what's actually written in the contract is often not shared.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on. I assumed you'd see a bit more of the contracts there. I don't. So I just, talking to people, I get the sense there are still quite a lot of people on and in office contracts but are working at home, and I think there's an interesting maybe discussion in there about contractually where people want to be on that one. But let's put that onto one side. But maybe some of the people in the audience will give us some contracts there, some comments there. What about the we've got a number of questions coming in about gender differences, okay, pay differences between in different areas. Somebody said about client services. Again, I'm just going to make the point that you've got data at each of those job levels, but be a bit careful with it. But the you know, one blunt question, Mark, you saw the data. You know, you've presented data on gender difference in the senior medical writer role, I think it was. Did you have the same data? Was it the same picture on the client services, that maybe at the top end there's a difference, but actually for the bulk of people now in MedComms, it's very similar?
It's very
fair point.
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. It's very difficult to actually analyze that data, principally because there's a ratio of, you know, 4 women to 1 man. So, you know, with the senior medical writer one, you know, you're looking at a data set of 20 guys, 70 women. When you go into a data set that's 40, then you're only talking about 8 guys potentially. Then if you're presenting gender data on 8 males against a pool of 30 odd females, then it's not valid. And statistically, you go, well, I don't care what it says. Statistically, it doesn't stand scrutiny. So what we did was we looked at the bigger data set with the under 35s across everything, and that showed the data equality against a, you know, 800, 1,000 people data set. So it's exactly as you say, Peter. You know, when people do these salary surveys, this is a big salary survey, right? Compared to most of them out there. It's a huge data set, but even then, when you chop it down to the little bits, statistically, if you over chop it, your data's rubbish in terms of the analysis. Exactly. So you've got to be really careful on what you do.
Okay. I wanted to pick up on a point. Sorry, we're skipping around a bit here, but the point about salary inflation, Mark, you said in your presentation, I think it was specifically again around maybe the senior medical writers, that you made a comment that, you know, the average salary was significantly higher than a couple of years ago. looking forward in terms of what the people are expecting salary increases to be is nowhere near as much as that. And I just wondered, just from your perspective, just what's happened over the last couple of years and what you're seeing going on, have we seen that salary inflation, because everyone talks about it, and are we seeing that calming down?
Yeah, I think I'll pass to Seb on this. So I just noted, I noted that I saw that the survey 2 years ago, 2021, had senior medical writers about 41 to 43. They're now 51, 53. That's a 20-25% easy increase over 2 years. And there was that hotbed after COVID. But let's pass to Seb what's actually happening now.
So we are seeing a bit of a reset on the whole salary side of things. I'm in regards to people paying more previously, that was the case. It was a very candidate short market. The market isn't as short now, and people also were experiencing some ridiculous salary requests coming through, and it was skewing the market. And that's not only difficult for hiring managers and companies to manage, because naturally they want everyone across a team to be paid fairly and not people coming in on a much higher salary than those below them, but also it's actually damaging to candidates looking for new jobs as well. So there's been times where I've been speaking to a medical writer that is looking for a 50k salary because their agency that they're currently with is paying them 47. They're never going to get that. So they've got this lower title, then they're not going to be able to progress in the same way because it's just going to scare off other agencies. So it's actually really damaging to both the candidate and the agency to be offering these large salaries. So everyone has taken a bit of a reset, and everyone is pushing back now and saying, no, this is the salary banding across the MedComms industry, and this is what we're prepared to offer. And it is all based on the individual. So just because you've got that title doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the upper end of the salary banding. It is based on experience. It is 100% based on how you perform in your writing test. But having said that, very fair industry. There have been medical writers that I've put forward for roles. They've performed exceptionally well in their writing test, and the agency has actually come back and said, actually, we think you're more of a senior medical writer level, so we're going to pay you within that banding and give you that title. So it is a very fair industry, but yes, there is definitely a reset there.
But the point you're talking around, it can be bewildering because the titles that people use are not consistent across different agencies, and as you say, a medical writer in one place, a medical writer in another, that can complicate these issues dramatically. So again, it's a word of warning for people looking across job ads or something like that. You can be talking about very different sorts of jobs. A couple of just covering off some very specific comments here. I might just do this very quickly myself, so disagree with me if you want to disagree with me. But for instance, somebody saying, about the gender split, how many women in MedComms, that just very consistently, I think your figure was something like 78% of the respondents to this survey were female. Every survey you do in MedComms and around MedComms is 75-ish% women. Okay. A question that came in about UK and non-UK data. Let's again just be very clear. This is a UK survey. I think anybody anywhere in the world could be able to look at this data, and again, it's food for thought in terms of whether, but be very, very clear. This is a UK survey that we've done here. Yeah. One of the questions, again, maybe we shouldn't go too far with this, but just as an observation, in terms of the sorts of businesses that were involved in this study. We were talking about MedComms, we were talking about healthcare communications in its broadest sense. A lot of the people filling the survey identified themselves as MedComms. There were also people in advertising, PR, MedEd, and so on. But it's very difficult to go much further than that, isn't there? And the truth is, again, we all define these terms in different ways. So I think, again, people have to be a little bit careful and go, this is quite an all-encompassing type survey around healthcare communications. Yeah. You got anything to comment on that front, or is that just a fair health warning again?
I think that's a very fair health warning, Peter. Off the top of my head, it was something like 80 to 90% recognise themselves as MedComms, and then it was the other percentage was spread across advertising, publishing, etc. So if you took those other sections, there wouldn't be enough data to actually report on them individually. And if we could find a way of dividing MedComms up, which is the big, huge chunk that everyone would recognise, then we could do
that
more.
everyone agrees with.
But the difficulty is that people have to recognise what they are within it, and that's a quagmire for individuals trying to fill a survey in a small break time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Again, I'm going to emphasize the fact that there's a lot more data available in the full report and from you guys. This question in terms of data collected on overtime, time in lieu, paid overtime. Sorry, was that not, we didn't cover that in today's presentation, but you have got data on that, haven't you? Was that not one of the slides that we presented?
Yeah, it wasn't in the slide that we did
Okay,
today, but we have the data set on that.
Okay, so it's worth looking at the full report for that. And just on that point, just as an observation, what were you seeing in the industry in terms of overtime and time off in lieu? Can you summarize it quickly for people on the call?
The majority got time off in lieu. It was a small percentage that had paid overtime. So it wasn't many of them. And then you've got kind of potential difficulties in there in terms of splitting the data into perms and contracts, where contracts would likely get paid overtime and perms wouldn't. But the general feeling was that not a lot of paid overtime, quite a lot of flexing, and if you had worked extra hours, you had that time off in lieu. Yeah.
I mean, again, it's a discussion point a lot of the time, and some of the agencies are now making a bit of a thing about the fact that they pay overtime, but it's not routine, is it? I just also wanted to throw in the fact that if any freelancers are watching this, again, there's data for the freelancers in the full report, but we've concentrated on the agency side here. We've got a couple of questions coming in about people coming into the business. I think, again, I'm just going to point you at the, sorry, I've lost the question again. There's quite great, guys, keep the questions coming. In terms of difficulty getting into the industry and so on, I mean, Seb, just maybe a quick final comment on that, because we should probably draw a line on this. You know, this is a very competitive business to get into, isn't it? You're talking about the hiring managers, or majority of them saying we're going to be growing, and all the rest of it. But there's still a disconnect slightly, isn't there? Because people want experienced people, and there's still a limit to the pot. It's still very competitive to get into as a new person, isn't it? Have you got any comments on that, Seb?
It is competitive to get into it. You're looking, most agencies will be looking for someone with a minimum of a bachelor's degree in sort of life sciences or similar. We do recruiting for agencies for graduate roles, but there are also agencies out there that have graduate schemes, things like that, internships that will also allow you to get a better sort of footing to propel yourself into the world of MedComms.
So that's not a problem. I just want to just make the point. It's very competitive to get into the business, and there's lots of opportunity there, but it is still a relatively small business. I mean, for all that we talk about, it's still a relatively small business. So by definition, there's relatively few position entry level roles, sort of thing. But hopefully, frankly, if anyone's watching this, any information like this is helping you understand the business and helping you understand the sort of opportunities. And there is a lot of opportunity here. And as Mark showed with that slide, how the career progresses and how the salaries can increase and so on is quite useful information to think about. I'm very aware that I've got questions coming at me quite fast, and I'm going to just annoy a few people by saying, I think for today, we're probably going to have to draw the line there. I'd like to say a huge thank you to you two. I'm just going to keep saying this. There's a lot more data there, so I hope people will go and download the full report and follow up with you guys. There's a lot, I'm sure, that will come out as we think more about the data. And to state the obvious, the idea is that this is going to be done each year. So some of this is going to be even more interesting when we can start to compare and contrast. There's some data from a couple of years ago, but it's worth saying this is a different exercise. So we need to sort of start looking in the next 2 or 3 years at how the data compares. So thank you to Mark and Seb. I know I can speak for you and say anybody can contact you via LinkedIn. That's the easy way. And from my point of view, anybody who's wondering what I'm up to, medcommsnetworking.com is the place to go. But for today, I'm going to draw the line there. If you're watching this at the moment, don't run away. We've got a few minutes to carry on talking. But for today and for this recording, I'm going to say thank you very much and ask everyone to give us a little bit of a wave. Bye-bye. Cheers.